What is up, everybody? My name is Raymond Summerlin. This is the Sharp Angles podcast, and I'm very excited today to be joined by the newest member of our Sharp football family. You heard her on this podcast with Warren Sharp last week. I'm excited to get to talk to her this week, and that is Pamela Maldonado, who's doing a lot of betting stuff for us, has a lot of betting articles already up on the website, Sharp Football Analysis. Make sure you go and check those out. We're going to talk about futures, going to talk about a lot of stuff here on this episode. I'm really excited. How you doing, Pam?
I'm doing great. We have college football starting on Saturday. Oh, that's tomorrow. Like it came really fast. And then we've got
It's hit us
NFL
in the
coming up.
face. Yeah.
And then it is see ya friends and family until February.
Yeah, it's it's wild. We're already there. I have some friends. One of my good friends just recently had a child, and they're like, Labor Day, let's all get together and we'll see the baby and we'll watch some college football. I'll be like, yeah, that'll be great here in the next 3 weeks, and then I realize that Labor Day is not this weekend, but the next one, and I go, oh, my year is over. We're already finished with this one. I'm interested because you do a lot of tennis stuff as well. Going to be doing a lot of NFL stuff for us, but you follow a ton of sports. You do a lot of tennis stuff for us. I seem to remember this time of year that while I was kind of getting everything ready for my final fantasy drafts, I would always have a good US Open match to watch at like
Mhm.
1 a.m. Why do I have no US Open this year? What's happening? When am I getting US Open?
Today, the draw just came out
Today?
last night. The tournament starts on Monday morning. The draw just
Monday
came out
morning.
last night. And so after this podcast, it's going to go straight to tennis work. I'm going to work on the draw. There's already some predictions. Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting one because of the attached storylines that you have. You have Novak Djokovic, who's completed tennis, including Olympic gold.
Yeah,
Now he could
there you go.
potentially win his 25th title. Yannick Sinner is coming off a doping scandal. Carlos Alcaraz is coming off smashing his racket. So you're talking about the three best players, all have some sort of storyline attached to them. It's going to be a good tournament.
That like him smashing his racket's wild because I'm not going to act like I follow tennis very closely, but he seems like such a cool dude, and then like him freaking out seemed odd. But I do have to ask you
Mhm.
about my guy Tiafo, Francis Tiafo, who I love, my favorite guy. His story's so cool, everything about him, I love him, his personality, everything's great. Do we have a chance? Are we going to make a run? I know he kind of did better in Wimbledon. I have to ask you while I have you here about my guy Tiafo.
I love Big Foe. He's one of my favorite American tennis players. And yeah, I expect him to at least make a deep run because he has made at least the quarterfinals in back to back years 2022, 2023. And he has a favorable draw. And he's coming off reaching a final in Cincinnati. So he's also coming into this with some good form. But it's not just a Big Foe. This is the first time since 1997 that we have 5 American men in the top 20 for the ATP rankings, and it's beyond just Big Foe. It's Taylor Fritz, Sebastian Corda. So we have a couple of players that are doing really well, and I'm really looking forward to watching the American men.
Yeah, that the American men, the American women have been holding it down for a long time. They're doing us proud. The American men, we haven't been there. It's been since Roddick in '03, right? That's the last one.
It's been a
Was that the U.S. Open?
long time.
Whew, it's been a while. I was a young man. I graduated from high school in '03, and now I'm very old. And so that was a that was a that was a long time ago. But anyway, this is not sharp tennis analysis, so we're going to stay away from that. But I do. It's funny. The last two podcasts I've done, I did one with Rich in between. The last two podcasts I've done, I got to talk about track and I got to talk about tennis. So slowly, I'm going to bring in. Soon I'll get cycling in here. Soon I'll get
I love that.
soccer in here. I'm going to bring all the other sports in, and I'm going to make our listeners pay attention to it. But we're going to talk about football. And like I said at the top, we're going to talk about some football futures. You have two articles on the website, sharpfootballanalysis.com, talking about both player props and team futures, lots of bets in all of those, interesting analysis in all of those. And so we're going to go through those and talk about, some of the more interesting bets and, kind of see where you stand. And I want to get started here with the Colts. Obviously, we had the Colts, they played last night, so they're kind of fresh on the top of our mind. And you have a couple interesting bets in there. Colts over 8.5 wins, and Colts to win the AFC South plus 325, which that's a really, really interesting bet. So what has you on the Colts? What makes you excited about that team this year?
I don't take preseason really into account at all when it comes to the NFL. So I know that Anthony Richardson threw a pick and it didn't look good, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of worry of he's coming back from injury. But just looking at the grander scheme of things, at the potential for 2024, the Colts are poised, I think, with having Anthony Richardson back as a starting quarterback. If he can stay healthy, that is the key phrase. Despite the injury setbacks that he had last season, a shoulder sprain that required surgery, had a concussion, Richardson has shown promise, did show promise in the few games that he did play. His athleticism, ability to make plays with his legs. In 4 games, Richardson showcased his dual threat abilities, which is what every team loves to have from a quarterback. 577 yards, 3 touchdowns. His rushing stats were what was most impressive for me. He had 136 yards on 25 attempts, 5.5 yards per carry. The belief for me is that despite the limited number of games that he had, we saw some really great things from Richardson. There is a pocket presence there. He can read the defenses. His ability to navigate the pressure. He can see downfield. That translate to being an effective quarterback if he can stay healthy. Now he does need to improve on his accuracy, but that's only going to come with the more game time that he has. So the longer he stays on the field, those reps are going to come in, and I fully believe that with him behind center, there's an opportunity here for them to have a really great ground attack and passing game complemented by running back Jonathan Taylor. The Colts running back should be formidable. Rushing attack should be formidable because both Richardson and Taylor, they both bring unique skill sets to the field that complement each other. With Richardson, you get that dual threat ability. With Taylor, he's one of the best NFL top running backs, known for his speed, his vision, his ability to break tackles, and that opens up the RPO potential. The presence of Richardson and Taylor in the backfield, it really opens up the possibilities for what we could see from the offense from the Colts.
Yeah, and I mean us fantasy nerds, the spreadsheet nerds over here on this side of the camera, we are very interested in Anthony Richardson, obviously because of that rushing ability you mentioned, and we saw that. But you brought up that we do have concerns about him as a passer. We're going to need to see what that is. But I think if you're really getting in on the Colts this year, it's a bet on Shane Steichen, and it's a bet on what we've seen from him as both an offensive coordinator and then last year as a head coach, which I think is that's not a bad thing to bet on. If you're betting on him as a coach from what we've seen, he kept the offense afloat last year with Gardner Minshew. They were still fine with Minshew at quarterback. And I know Minshew's going to be the starter of the Raiders this year, and we'll see how that works out. I think that Steichen had a lot to do with that. We saw what happened to the Eagles offense after he left there. We saw what he was able to do with Hurts. You brought up how he was involved in kind of with Justin Herbert as well in the article. And so I think Shane Steichen has proven what he is as a coach. And if you're betting on the Colts, you're betting on that and seeing kind of that improvement from Richardson. And the other part about it is we know that they're going to play fast. We know that they're going to do the things we want an offense to do. And if they're going to do that, that's going to give Richardson the best opportunity. And then the receiving core. I mean, if A.D. Mitchell is what the beat writers have been writing about and saying every single day about him in training camp, and they're able to add that to Pittman and to Josh Downs when he comes back, and the 17 tight ends that they have on that roster, I don't know which tight ends catching passes, but all of them are catching passes at some point this year. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And like I said, if you're betting on a coach that you really believe in, that can get you a long way, I think.
I do love that you mentioned having the head coach Shane Steichen because yes, as you mentioned, he has a proven track record of developing quarterbacks. What I also like about the Colts is we're talking about Anthony Richardson, but they do have depth at quarterback position with Joe Flacco. And you talked about how Steichen likes to play fast. Well, so did Flacco last season, and now he's in a really good position here that if he needs to step up to the plate, he's going to be able to deliver. And I have confidence in Flacco with his arm ability, with the extensive history that he has in the league, that he would be a good fit to play a suitable backup. And they also have a favorable schedule, and that's one of the things that I really like to target most when you're looking at season-long player props, season-long season win totals, is how strong or weak of a schedule do you have? There are some early season challenges when they're facing against the Texans, who won the AFC South champs last year, followed by the Packers, another 2023 playoff contender. But they have an opportunity here to really capitalize on some wins later in the season, starting from week 13. The Colts get teams like the Patriots, the Broncos, the Titans, the Giants, and the Jaguars. The only team projected to have a winning season is the Jaguars of that bunch. So there's an opportunity here that they can really solidify their season win total at the end of the season.
And if you're thinking about the Colts and you like the Colts, and I mentioned at the top, and this is just kind of one of those, I don't know if you're giving it out as a pick, but you said, I'm interested at least in the Colts to win the AFC South plus 325. Right. And if you're interested in that, that means that you're probably a little bit lower on the Texans than you are. You have here the Texans under 9.5 wins. And that is I'll say that's a bold take, but I'm interested in kind of where you're coming from with the Texans there.
So my belief with the Texans, there's I feel like everything that I've done so far with sharp football has been a bit on the contrarian side. But I mean,
No, I love it.
I'm
A
such a big
100% in
believer.
on it. Yeah.
I'm such a big believer in regression to the mean. And
Yeah.
no team, no quarterback was put fans, betters in awe like CJ Stroud and the Texans last year. They
Yeah. True.
massively overperformed expectations in the 2023 season, which leads to regression the following year more often than not. Now there are exceptions to the rule and we're going to find out real quick if this is the exception, but the Texans jumped from 3 wins in 2022 to 10 wins in 2023. And but if you look at the quarterbacks that they faced, Kenny Pickett, Will Levis twice, Derek Carr, Kyler Murray, who's always banged up, Russell Wilson, who's on a new team, Trevor Lawrence, who was also injured, Gardner Minshew, Baker Mayfield, and a banged up Joe Burrow. What elite quarterback in that mix says anything that's threatening to a defense? The 2024 schedule looks a heck of a lot different than what they saw last year. They're going to get top tier quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. They're getting better quarterbacks when the defense from the Texans had a middle of the pack pass rush. The interior defensive line's ability to generate pressure on opposing quarterbacks severely lacking. They have promising edge rushers when it comes to Will Anderson. Absolutely, he has potential, and in the long run, he can be a formidable force. But that interior line needs to contribute more to the pass rush to prevent these better quarterbacks that they're going to face from stepping into the pocket and making plays. Otherwise, Houston is going to struggle mightily on that defense against a tougher schedule, projected seventh hardest in the NFL. Last year, they played only 4 teams that made the playoffs. This year, they're getting 11 predicted to have winning seasons, including 3 that won 12 plus games. If the defense struggles, more pressure is going to be applied on CJ Stroud, who's coming off a historical NFL rookie season. Youngest quarterback to win a playoff game, the most passing yards in a game by a rookie, most passes without an interception. He did all of that. He was stellar. Now, can you be just as good against a tougher schedule? Regression. I'm such a believer that regression is coming in some fashion.
And I think, it's funny because this very well could just be a blind spot for me because I agree with you. I think that if you're betting against teams that surprised the year before, in
Mhm.
general, that's going to work out for you. Sometimes it doesn't. It didn't for me with the Lions last year. So maybe that's stuck in my brain. Maybe I was very recently burned by the Lions. But I think in general, that idea makes a lot of sense. And on the defense, you mentioned the defense. They lost some pieces. I like the additions that they made with like replacing them with Daniil Hunter, with Al Shahir at linebacker. We thought with Nico Autry in the interior line, to your point about the interior, pass rush, replacing Sheldon Rakins, Autry's going to be, suspended for 6 games. He will be back at some point. What I'll say is I think there are 2 things working in the Texans' favor. The first is you mentioned CJ Stroud had an unbelievable year for a rookie, but it also wasn't just an unbelievable year for a rookie. It wasn't like one of the best seasons we've seen from a rookie. It was just
Right.
a good quarterback season to begin with. And it's possible that he
Mhm.
is just a very good NFL quarterback. He was 6th
Right.
in EPA per dropback among qualified quarterbacks last year. And that was with an injured offensive line. And that was with the injuries at receiver with Nico Collins and Take Dell not always being there at the same time. But the real thing is, because I think you could be right about CJ Stroud, maybe we tend to expect like linear progression from players, and
Mhm.
sometimes that doesn't happen, right? And so we'll see what happens here with Stroud. Maybe he does kind of have a sophomore slump. We don't know. I mean, we're going to talk about them in a second. Trevor Lawrence at the end of 2022, we thought, okay, this is the
Mhm.
Trevor Lawrence we expect. And then last season it kind of fell off. That wouldn't be the first time that's ever happened. The
Right.
thing about the Texans, though, to me, they're doing the right thing with an elite quarterback. They
Yes.
are on a rookie contract. They are going and they trying to improve that defense. They spent, even though they lost some guys, they spent to replace them. They traded for Stephon Diggs. It seems to me like this organization, and what a wild thing to say about the Texans that you never would have said 3 years ago, but it seems to
2
me that
years
this
ago.
organization, yeah, I know. I was even giving it the benefit of the doubt with 3, but like it's they seem to know what they're doing. They seem to be putting all their cards, all their chips into the middle of the table when they should be. And
Mhm.
I'm hopeful that that works out. But again, I have to say, yeah, betting against the surprise team from the year before has tended to be an okay decision, as we learned with the Browns 7 years in a row or something like that.
Mm.
When we thought that they were going to be the one. The Chargers are always in this discussion, right? We're doing it again with the Chargers this year. Maybe it happens with Jim Harbaugh. We'll see. But yeah, I think that general idea is an important one to hold on to when you're looking at season wins.
I like the arguments that you made, and they're all very valid. And I'm in full agreement with you that the Texans made the right moves. They already have a strong roster. Now they're making it even stronger. I agree with that sentiment. But when I also look at, I'm very much into like the data set of things. And the Texans won 10 games last season, 6 of which were won by 7 points or less.
Mhm.
Areas need to improve to the point where one of the games that the Texans played, 39-37 win to the Bucks, having passed for 5 touchdowns from Stroud. 5 touchdowns and you win by 2 points. That is just a huge indicator that there are some there are some holes to plug, and some of that is
Yeah.
going to come from that's part of the regression part. Winning 6 games by 7 points or less, 5 of which were won by 5 points or less, that is something that's going to be very difficult to sustain in the long run. So unless you learn how to garner some of that separation, it goes beyond the interior offensive and the defensive lines. Also that the 2023, the Texans allowed 47 sacks. There's issues in the pass protection. The run game could struggle with not having Devin Singletary. The Texans do get Joe Mixon. He's on the decline. I'm not a big believer
Mhm.
in what this run game has to offer from the Texans, but I am a big believer in Stroud. But overall, as a unit, considering a tougher schedule, considering possible regression just because of how elite they were last season, and because of how they won their games, very close, narrow margins, all of that potential could lead to. But what's that saying that they always have? Buy low and sell high. You couldn't be selling the Texans at a higher point right now.
Yeah, and to your point, their expected win-loss based on their point differential last season was 9.2, so almost a full win lower. And by the way, would go under 9.5 wins. So yeah, it's a fair point for sure. I'm not even, you might be able to see the Astros behind me. I'm not even a Texans fan because I grew up with the Oilers and then they abandoned me, and I've just been an NFL agnostic for a long time. But I don't know, I guess there's something deep down in my Houston, Texas soul that I want the Texans to be good. And so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. We'll say we're
I need to clarify that I am not a CJ Stroud. I am a believer. I am a fan just as much as the next person. But I got to go with the data. And the data says that regression, even if it just means like they lose one of those games, instead of winning by 2, they're going to lose by 2. Like stuff like that. It comes down to one error, one mistake, and throughout a full season, that could be the make or break for an over and under on the season win total.
No, you heard her. She hates CJ Stroud. She thinks he's going to fall off. Tweet her, at her on Twitter. Um, so finishing up this division, let's just talk about the AFC South with the Jaguars under 8.5 wins. You're not going to get pushback from me on this one. I have to say, I've said this before, but it's such an interesting idea to me that at this time last year, we viewed the Jaguars as the clear class of this division. And now you look at them, and definitely with how high you are on the Colts, they're at best third, and they better hope that Will Levis is not the answer for the Titans. Like it's such a weird situation we have ourselves in with the Jaguars versus where we were a year ago. But like 1 year of really disappointing performances, losing Calvin Ridley, like that's where you end up here with the Jaguars. And I mean, yeah, I think you can make an argument that they are at best the third best team in this division, and that's going to make it tough, I think, to go over 8.5 wins.
First off, I am a Jags fan. So I feel like I can do like an entire like docu series on why I don't like the Jags to contend this season. First off, let's talk about the schedule. On paper, it's supposed to be the 15th easiest schedule based on the Vegas forecasted win totals for the season. Great. That doesn't seem too difficult. Except what's going to hurt their wins is I mean, there's a few factors. You did get Gabe Davis and you have Mitch Morse. The Jaguars made significant offseason acquisitions. You got Gabe Davis and Mitch Morse, who's supposed to help at the center, who's supposed to help with the offensive line, which of course has been a weakness for the Jags over the last few seasons. But Davis is known for his size, known for his red zone ability. Trevor Lawrence has a valuable target now. But his inconsistency in a high octane offense with the Buffalo Bills is what gives me question marks when it comes to Davis. I don't have belief in Davis having an impact on a week-to-week basis. His catch rate and targets in 2022, I know this is a couple of years back, but his catch rate was only 51%. That was a career low. Game game to game variability, his performance last season it fluctuated highly. He recorded several games without having a single catch. His role and his usage primarily lined up at the wide receiver. He played over 1,000 snaps in the 2022 season with the majority out wide. He has that deep threat ability, but I also don't trust that Trevor Lawrence has the ability to target him when he needs to because of the injuries that Trevor Lawrence has sustained, because of Trevor Lawrence's inconsistency that he had himself. It seemed like from 2022 to 2021, Lawrence showed significant improvement from his rookie year. From the 2023 season, from the 2022, we saw a decline. You're supposed to be getting better as a quarterback, and instead we saw Trevor Lawrence get worse. He threw fewer touchdowns, nearly doubling his interceptions. And if you look at some data points, completion percentage, passing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, passer rating, sacks taken, every single one of those stats got worse in the 2023 season. Now, how much of that was injury? He had a high ankle sprain, a knee bruise, a concussion, and a shoulder AC joint sprain. Great. Every quarterback in the NFL is dealing with something. Every team is injured in the latter part of the year. How much benefit of the doubt are we going to start giving Trevor Lawrence? I have been on the Trevor Lawrence train since his junior year in college. When I picked him to win the Heisman, didn't happen. I picked him to win the Heisman again in his final year, it didn't happen. I had hopes that he was going to do well in his rookie year. We know how that worked with Urban Meyer. I just haven't seen the progression from Lawrence that I would like to see following his career so intently over the last few years. The lack of protection, he was sacked 35 times. That's an increase from the previous season. That disrupts the passing game. That disrupts even his confidence. It contributes to lower performance metrics, as mentioned. The potential is there for Lawrence, but when do we stop talking about his potential? And when do we say, all right, you got to start doing something? You've got to be better with your decision making under pressure. You've got to be able to adapt to injuries somehow. You've got to the offensive line performance that needs to improve. Generational talent, when does that come?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's a question of when do we stop? Like, what's the barrier or the kind of dividing line between excuses and reasons, right?
Right.
And we have a lot of reasons here for Trevor Lawrence and what's been happening. You brought up injuries last year, which feels valid if you go and look at kind of like his game by game split, specifically with inaccurate target rate. That you see that with the injury, specifically the ankle injury, that we see his accuracy numbers. We see those decline for sure, and so that feels more like a reason than an excuse. But like these continue to stack. And like you mentioned, the offensive line, I don't think they brought in Mitch Morse. I don't think the offensive line, you're feeling much better about it this year than you were. The defense
Yeah.
is I think fine, but it's definitely not special. They do perhaps have an elite upside with their pass rushing duo there with
Mhm.
Josh Hines Allen, just continuing to be what he's been, and then maybe you hope that Travon Walker continues to take a step forward last year. But it's all about Trevor Lawrence. It's just all about Trevor Lawrence, and you mentioned it. Is he going to live up to what we all expected him to be? Is he going to be able to kind of get past this? Even if there are issues, even if it's not perfect, even if you're having to
Mhm.
quarterback for Urban Meyer, to be fair to him, could anybody would prime Peyton Manning have
I was
thrived
just
in that
saying,
situation? I think that's a
fair
fair
enough.
question. But like you're gonna have to eventually get through those because, like you said, all teams face these difficulties and we need to see it. To your point about the receiving core and Gabe Davis, I mean, Gabe Davis has never he played with Stephon Diggs, and that's fair, and we have to say that, but he has never been a target earner, certainly not on the level that Calvin Ridley was. We don't know what Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be able to do as a rookie. I mean, not Calvin, not Calvin Ridley. Christian Kirk. We like Christian Kirk, and Christian Kirk 2 years ago had a really good year, but he's already hurt now. He had some injury
Right.
issues last year. They have Evan Ingram, but we know what Evan Ingram is. He's more of a low upside kind of underneath receiver who's only going to ever catch 4 touchdowns. All fantasy players know exactly who Evan Ingram is as a player, and so like all of that put together, Travis Etienne is coming off of a really disappointing season from an
Mhm.
efficiency standpoint. Again, offensive line had a lot to do with that, but the offensive line, we
Mhm.
don't know if it's better. Like you look at all of it, and you just think, at best, I can feel fine about the Jaguars at every place.
Love
That
that.
means that Trevor Lawrence needs to elevate where they are,
Mhm.
and or do we expect that to happen? I don't know. So it's really hard for me to get excited about the Jaguars, especially since, like you said, I agree with you about the Colts. I think the Colts are probably better than the Jaguars. So if I think they're third in this division that I already don't think is very good, I mean, it's tough to really get excited about them.
Well, we keep talking about the offensive line for the Jags, and we haven't really like touched much up on it. Yes, they brought in Mitch Morse. How much of a benefit? How much of an upgrade is that really? He did play with top tier quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. Great. He has a deep understanding. Excuse me, a little frog in my throat. He had a deep understanding of the offensive schemes with both of those teams. Great. We know this about him. He has the ability to assist in recognizing defensive alignments and calling protections. Okay, so that is a positive. Mitch Morse is coming in with experience. His presence alone is beneficial. But are we going to call Morse coming in transformative? That's like the word that I'm looking for right now because we need to see a big upgrade when it comes to the offensive line. And though I think Morse coming in is a benefit, I don't think it's going to be anything, he's going to do anything to elevate. His impact is more about stability rather than elevating the line to an elite status. And that's what we need to have for somebody like Trevor Lawrence, who has given us inconsistency in his NFL career. Last year, the Jags' offensive line ranked 31st in pass block rate by PFF. Due to poor pass blocking efficiency, high pressure rates allowed. He can help address some of those issues, but the Lions' overall weakness is still there, and it remains there because that's the only change that the Jags made to the offensive line. The core group remains largely the same, which could limit the potential for improvement from Trevor Lawrence and the receivers.
We're going to move on to talk about players. We're going to move on to spreadsheet nerd like me. We're going to move on to the players and talk about over unders. I'm about to be in my element. You're going to see me light up
Love
like
it.
a
I
Christmas
love
tree.
it.
Before we do that, though, I do want to mention all of Pam's thoughts on betting futures available at sharpfootballanalysis.com, sharp.football. Make sure you go and check that out. Over on the website, we have our fantasy football draft kit available. Rich Rebar is finishing up a series this week on how to draft your fantasy team. If you just need a one-stop shop at how Rich Rebar is drafting fantasy teams, Rich Rebar, one of the best in the business, wins a bunch of leagues. Check that out. We just had a futures release as part of our futures package as well. So you can go and check that out, get those fresh futures picks from Warren Sharp. A ton available at Sharp Football Analysis. Make sure you go and check that out. Let's get on to the player props. And you sent one over that I couldn't be more in on Lamar Jackson over 675 and a half rushing yards. And I'm going to let you go. And then I'm just going to wax poetic about my love for Lamar Jackson this year. So
I feel like,
have
are we just
fun.
gonna vibe right now? Is that what's gonna happen?
We're vibing. I'm in.
We are
Yeah.
vibing. Well, it starts and ends with Todd Monken, right? His offensive strategy. It's tailored to enhance Lamar Jackson's strengths. And what's his strength? His rushing ability. Jackson, by incorporating some of those design runs, optimizing the play sequencing, maintaining balanced attack, Monken's approach to the offense is well suited for Jackson to surpass 675 and a half rushing yards. This is one of my favorite bets. It's probably my favorite one of the season. He has been consistently one of the most dynamic rushing quarterbacks in the NFL. And you've seen it in previous seasons. He surpassed 1,000 rushing yards multiple times. Jackson in 2019, that led him to have a single season rushing record for quarterbacks of over 1,200 yards. Last year, Jackson rushed over 800 yards, averaging 51 yards per game. That is mega huge. And I love that because there's consistency from what we see from the offensive scheme, from play calling, from Jackson. His ability to create plays with his legs, it's such a cornerstone when it comes to the Ravens offense. And it starts, as mentioned, with Todd Monken. His offensive strategy: maximize the talents of Jackson, exploit the gaps in the defense, design runs, go with improv plays. And no player can do an improv play better than Jackson. He creates things on the fly. He can read defenses and make a split second decision on what he wants to do next. And now, because the Baltimore uses their quick read concepts and three-step drop pass plays, that allows Jackson to improve his decisions quickly. He's in rhythm. He finds rhythm in the game, and you just see it. I know that there's an argument to be made of, oh, well, then now they have Derrick Henry. I'm not convinced that King Henry, is going to be utilized as much in the long run plays, more so than he could be utilized down at the goal line. The strong presence that he has, it preserves Jackson's rushing threat. It makes him more effective in the later stages of the game when the defense is tired. Now, I expect Henry to be utilized in the goal line situations because history has shown us that the Ravens have reduced Jackson's involvement in the goal line carries. we've seen a decline in the past few seasons. Every year I want to do a Lamar Jackson rushing touchdown. They're becoming fewer and fewer and fewer. I backed off of those. And because of that, I'm just more inclined to believe that Derrick Henry is going to be used more to punch stuff in. And so many opportunities are going to come afloat from Jackson being able to run the ball downfield. I have the belief that because of the schedule that they have also, in the first 10 weeks, the Ravens face just two teams inside the top 10 of rushing defenses. Lamar Jackson and company, they're going to just have a solid season of run game. And that's what we see from them every year, facing more difficult schedule. And now you're getting this.
Yeah, no, I'm so like when I saw this number, I checked it because I'm pretty sure, and
Whoa.
I'm looking at it right now on my screen because
Hmm.
I'm convinced that um he's been over this number every year of his career, right?
Hmm.
Am I
Hmm.
wrong about that? That we've been over
Yeah.
this number every year? So like one of the problems with betting overs on player props is that the risk of injury is always there. And if a
Yes.
player gets hurt and they go under, like that's why when you look at fantasy football projections and look at totals on betting sites, the fantasy football projections are almost always higher because that risk of injury really makes the unders more palatable. And frankly, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I saw last year that if you just blanket bet player unders, you won
Unders.
like 55 to 60% of them because unders are generally better because, again, that injury and it's a very tough game. But we've
Hmm.
had these injury issues with Lamar Jackson. He played 12 games in 2021. He played 12 games in 2022. He still went 760 rushing yards in both of those years. Like this is just
Hmm.
something that he does. And
Right.
you mentioned Derrick Henry, and I think it's fair. They actually have like a true number one running back. But a
Yeah.
lot of what Lamar Jackson's doing is on scrambles. That's
Yep.
that's where he's making a lot of these rushing
Improv
yards
plays.
happen, which has nothing to do with the running back game. And I've
Exactly.
mentioned the stat before as part of my push that Lamar Jackson is the overall quarterback one in fantasy football. I'm very
Mhm.
excited about him for fantasy this year. Is if you
Mm.
look at what the Ravens did last year, they ran just 85 offensive plays while trailing in the second half. That was easily the fewest in the league. It's the seventh fewest by any team since the year 2000. That is the level that they were at last season in the regular season. We know it didn't work out in the playoffs, but that's where
Right.
they were last season. That's how historically good they were last season. What that means is that the Ravens weren't dropping back to throw the football in the second half. They were ninth
Right.
in drop back rate in the first half of games last season, but their drop back rate when leading in the second half was 44.3%, and they were almost always leading in the second half. That's not going to happen again. This team has some issues on the offensive line. They lost talent on defense. They lost coaching
Mhm.
on defense. And frankly, teams just don't do that over and over again. We saw it with the
Right.
Eagles last year. Even when the Eagles were winning last year, they were not winning in the same ways by blowing teams out in the first half. That's just not something that continues year after year. The Ravens are going to have to drop back to throw more this year. That is definitely going to happen. I feel
Mhm.
very confident in that. Lamar Jackson has scrambled on 10% of his dropbacks throughout his career. He scrambled on 12.1% of his dropbacks last season. He averages
Mhm.
7.73 yards per scramble in his career. We could be talking about 10, 15 more scrambles. And if we're talking about that, we're talking about 100 extra rushing yards on top of just what he already normally does. There are so many things pointing that Lamar Jackson's going to have a really special yardage season, touchdowns,
Mhm.
to your point.
Mhm.
They don't use him down there like they use Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia or Josh Allen in
Right.
Buffalo. They don't do that with him, and they have Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry's going to get a lot of those touchdowns. That's why you're interested in Derrick
Mhm.
Henry in fantasy. But from a yardage perspective, I think Lamar Jackson's going to have a really big rushing yardage year, and I'm confused by this line, frankly. And that confusion is my only concern: is that
Well,
are
I
they
think
baiting me? Are they
I was
baiting me here?
that could be it, right? And that's the problem with sports betting is are they
Yep.
baiting you? But I also think because of the addition of Derrick Henry, that really comes into play of well, there's a possible misconception that Derrick Henry is going to go back to his 2,000-yard season because we know the Ravens are committed to the ground game. So automatically, 1 + 1 = 2. Oh, there you go. That's it. But I think
Yeah.
because last year the Ravens, going back to the scheduling, last year the Ravens had the league's third best rushing attack. I'm talking about all the improv plays that he had, the scrambling ability that you just mentioned. You have the third best rushing attack, and you're playing against the ninth toughest schedule. And now you have Derrick Henry is going to take a load off of you, yes, but it goes back to preservation towards the later end of the games. It's just what is your belief of Derrick Henry's role? And that is why the number is placed as such. If you think Henry is going to be utilized as that 2000 back that he had a few years ago, well then yeah, maybe you and I are like the suckers for for taking the bait. But if we are under the perception that Derrick Henry himself is getting older and he is because of his size, because the sheer size that he has, he could be utilized more at the goal line situations and preserve the legs for Jackson to get downfield because of that scrambling ability. Well, then to me, this is like an easy over.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm worried about how in we both are. This is a recipe for disaster. That's all I know.
You're calling
The
him QB1. I'm saying, like, yeah, he's going to have another amazing rushing yard season.
yeah,
Hey, you know what? If you go
we
down with the
apologize.
ship, I am too.
Yeah, we apologize, Lamar Jackson and Baltimore Ravens fans, for whatever curse we have placed upon you. All right, let's do some negativity. Let's do some negativity so we get away from this positive nonsense. You'll have Mike Evans under 1,050 and a half receiving yards. And it's so funny. Like the first part of your write-up, I laughed at. You said, well, he gets 1,000 yards every year. So this is a little bit wild, which is true. 10 years in a row now he has 1,000 yards. But you made some really interesting points about why we might be leaning this way under for Mike Evans.
So this is I'm going to preface this. The next two that we're talking about, very contrarian. I understand this because you just said Mike Evans has 1,000 yards every season, and his yardage is 1,050. So I'm banking right on the middle of that, but I'm not even convinced that he's going to hit 1,000 yards this year. So this is the sell high spot. His production is entirely contingent upon quarterback Baker Mayfield. Do I trust Mayfield to produce again? Because he exceeded expectations in several areas last year. He had a 14% touchdown rate, which ranks second in the league. He averaged 18 yards YPA, that was third. He had career highs in completion percentage and in passing yards. And now you have offensive coordinator Dave Canales. Huge part of those metrics being superb for Mayfield, he's gone. So now I'm asking myself, Mayfield, who historically hasn't been an elite quarterback, with a brand new offensive coordinator, this is more of a fade on Mayfield, and Mike Evans is going to suffer the consequences of that. The Bucs, I think, could attempt to have more of a focus on the run game because of their new offensive coordinator in Liam Cohen. The Bucs are expected to maybe implement more balanced offensive approach, diversify the run game, have different blocking schemes, play designs, mid-zone, wide zone runs, keep the defenses guessing, maximize the talent of the running backs that they have. Indications of why I like Evans to go under and why I think they're going to utilize more of the run game is because the Bucs made investments in the offensive line to enhance that run blocking capability. They drafted a center in Graham Barton. He's known for his aggressive run blocking style. They bolstered the backfield by drafting Bucky Irving. He's expected to share the workload with Rachaad White. Those are all key indicators that they are trying to be more balanced, take some of the load off of Mayfield, who may have regression from a stellar season, and Mike Evans could end up paying the price for that. And they have a tough schedule. I mean, in theory, they have a tough schedule because on paper, they are facing the 11th easiest. But if you look at the specific matchups, there's a lot more complexity to it. Away games at Detroit, Chiefs, Chargers, better defenses than what they faced last year, the Niners, Baltimore. It's a tougher schedule of passing defenses in terms of YPA. The toughest schedule of passing defenses in terms of YPA and explosive passing plays allowed. All of this with a new offensive coordinator. Sorry, Mike Evans, you may not actually have 1,000 yards this season.
I think your point about Mayfield is the one. I think that, and actually, if you get Warren Sharp's preview book, which you can get, I believe, for 50% off using code Get Sharp. Look at that, me remembering to promo stuff. But if you go into Warren Sharp's book, he has some really interesting stats about Mayfield. He actually even wrote an article about this over at the site sharpfootballanalysis.com. Mayfield really benefited from running back targets last year. He ranked 22nd in yards per attempt on non-running back throws. And so if you go and look at the work that he was doing with Rachaad White and all that, and Rachaad White's obviously still there, that was happening. You say, well, Mike Evans still got there even with that happening. That's true. But if we see a fall off in this running back passing game, which we might see with the offensive changes, or just, that's not a particularly sticky thing to stick around with, with running back targets, that doesn't just hurt Baker Mayfield. That hurts the offense as a whole. That hurts how many plays they run. That hurts how long their drives last. that hurts Mike Evans as well. And moreover than that, if we're talking about like drive length and how many plays and opportunities we're seeing here for the offense as a whole, that would again hurt Mike Evans. Baker Mayfield was really, really good on third down last year. That is not a particularly sticky thing to see happen. And that's also just not something we've seen from Mayfield in his career. He has yet another coordinator change. I mean, poor Baker Mayfield. Can we get him the same coach 2 years in a row? Just once in his life, could we have that? So yeah, I think this bet against Evans is really a bet against Baker Mayfield. We can also see, and I think the point about Chris Godwin is really important, as we saw Chris Godwin's target share increase at the end of last season, as I believe it was his wife was on Twitter, like going after the coaching staff for not getting Godwin targets.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then Godwin got more targets. So good on her. Good on supporting him. I appreciate that. But we're also probably going to see Godwin work more from the slot this year, which is going to be very good for him. That's where he's going to, Penn State legend. Thank you. We are going to be, very good from that point of view. And so I think, there are a lot of things really working against this. And then you think to yourself, am I overthinking it? Is he just going to get 1,000 yards again? Because he's Mike Evans, and that's what
Mike Evans has had
Maybe.
1,000 receiving yards in each of his 10 NFL seasons. So this is a fade on history. But of those 10 seasons, his receiving yards right now is 1,050. In those 10 seasons, he hasn't hit over this total 3 times. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that it can fall somewhere right between 1,000 and 1,049. That's what we're kind of hoping for. Or I'm under the impression that maybe this is the first year where he just doesn't hit 1,000 yards because Baker Mayfield regresses, because you don't have Dave Canales. Dave Canales is a huge contributing factor to what this offense was last year. You take him out of the equation, and I'm not Liam Cohen is a very great OC, but that change, I think just that alone was a huge mark for how well Mayfield did last year.
I didn't think about it. We are very Houston-centric this year. Mike Evans, legend of Galveston, Texas. Mike Evans. Galveston, Texas, where Charles Barkley is no longer welcome. That is the... Did you see that whole thing with Charles?
I did.
I continue to love it, because there were a lot of people that were offended, except all of us that grew up in that area and know that Galveston water's trash. And if y'all want to come at me, Galveston, those are just facts. Those are just facts, Galveston. It's not great down there.
Wait, did you grow up in Texas?
I grew up in Houston, Texas, right outside Houston, Texas, and then I lived in more of Southeast Texas. There you go, H-Town, baby. Here we go. There I am, excited. I celebrate every June. Kirk Cousins, under 27.5 passing touchdowns. Let's bring this home with Kirk Cousins. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have a strong take about this, but my first thought when I saw it was, if you're going to bet against an older quarterback with coming back from a serious injury, that kind of seems like a fine thing to bet against, especially when that team literally drafted his successor at pick number 8. Like, at some point,
they maybe don't have confidence as well.
Maybe there's some things pointing this way. So what about Kirk Cousins? Are you a little bit wary about?
If it was as simple as that, that would be my analysis. Homeboy is coming back from injury. How elite of a quarterback can he be? Let's start with that. Yes, he had a season-ending Achilles tendon injury that he had in November of last year. Now, reports are indicating that he is recovering well. He's participating fully in team activities. But my question is, can he return to peak form? The version of Cousins that we know him to be. Deep ball passer, accurate, very good cohesion when it comes to his receivers. Now you're on a new team, and there's a lot of new with the Falcons. I mean, we're talking about new offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson. He comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree. I do love that. So the Falcons are likely, though, to implement an offense that utilizes 1-1 personnel. Now, that tells me that I don't necessarily want to target Chris Cousins' passing yardage because of that personnel usage. That's going to spread the field. He has targets in Drake London, Rondale Moore, tight end Kyle Pitts. Even Bijan Robinson can be utilized in the passing game. He has a diverse group of wide receivers, but I don't want to touch the passing yards. My thinking on targeting the touchdowns instead, you have to adjust to Robinson's offensive scheme. Emphasize frequent motions and shifts. Because Cousins is coming off of that season-ending injury, his ability to stay healthy, maintain peak performance, that's going to be critical. I expect also maybe more use of the running backs. Potentially, this could be the year of Bijan. So I was looking at considering his rushing yards prop, he's Robinson is coming from the Sean McVay coaching tree. Have balance on the run, have balance on the pass, lean heavily on the run game. 1-1 can create more running lanes for the running backs, increase the chances of scoring in the red zone. Bijan Robinson is a workhorse. Utilize him just how the 49ers utilized Christian McCaffrey. Look at the production of running backs in similar offensive systems in previous years. Kyron Williams, success under Robinson's guidance with the Rams. It's clear that the Falcons backs could have a very productive season because Cousins is coming back from injury, because the Falcons have such a strong running back group. I think there's going to be a lot more balance. And because of that, touchdowns, Bijan Robinson, running backs at the goal line could be the benefit.
Yeah, and I mean Tyler Algier is the other running back, and Tyler Algier has proven to be good in those situations as well. And so if you're just looking at who they're going to use around there, I think that's fair. The Achilles thing. So I was talking with Rich on Tuesday on this podcast, and I did a little bit of a Windhorse meme as we were talking about them not using Penix in the second preseason game. Which,
Mm-hmm.
to be fair, Raheem Morris comes from the Rams. Zach Robinson comes from Rams. They all come from the Rams. The Rams don't play
Right.
their starters in the preseason. That's just a thing that they do. They have a very similar kind of viewpoint. Maybe that's just all this was. And the coaches obviously care a lot more now about the joint practices than they do than the actual preseason games. And so you're trying not
Right.
to read too much into all of that, which, by the way, that has made life for fantasy people so much more difficult. We used to have nice little glimpses of who the starters are going to be, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
get that as much. We have to figure out more interesting ways. And so maybe that's all that was. But not getting Penix live reps in a preseason game for a guy that you would think you expect to sit for at least this year, and if things go well, probably
Mm-hmm.
multiple years. It's just interesting. It's just an interesting thing to think about what that means. We have no
What does it
indications about that
mean?
Cousins is not going to start week 1. We have none of that. But if we're just putting our tinfoil hats on and we're diving deep into the conspiracy well, it is interesting that a guy you don't expect to get any reps this year, you're not at least getting preseason reps. It's a fascinating thing to think about, is all. And that's why we're Windhorse memeing out here.
That is good, and that's a very good conspiracy theory, we'll call it that. It
Yeah.
works well. It works well for this narrative at least. But then also just looking at the history, and all I really have is Kyron Williams to fall back on, is he had 12 rushing touchdowns in the 2023 season with Robinson's guidance with the Rams. Very much, I think it could be a Bijan Robinson year, which could lead to an under for passing touchdowns from Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I don't like all those stats and numbers. I'm just going straight vibes.
Straight vibes.
Vibes.
He was sitting. What does it mean?
We're doing nothing but narrative street. That's all we're doing
And
here.
preseason, that's kind of all we have though. And you're not going to get any of these numbers. You're not going to get any real indication until week 1, until week 2, of which, yeah, we're talking about season-long player props, but all of these are
Yeah.
things to start thinking about after week 1 for the following week prop, for
Yeah.
picking them up into your fantasy team the following week. These are all things that you
Yeah.
need to pay attention to in the early weeks of the season.
Oh, don't worry. Wait until I very much overreact to some random receiver running 10 routes in my waiver column. It'll be a massive overreaction, and I'll regret it for the rest of the year. That's it. That's all we've got for today. I'm obviously gone off the deep end now with my tinfoil, so we should probably get out of here. Thank you for listening to this point. If you listen to this point, obviously you like what we're doing. Make sure you subscribe to the Sharp Angles podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, head over to YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Warren Sharp over at YouTube, and you'll be able to find us over there. You give a rating everywhere. That would be great. Give us a like. We certainly appreciate that. Head over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. So much over there. We've got Pam's articles. We've got our futures package. We've got our fantasy football draft kit. If you're getting ready for a draft this weekend or next weekend, get all of that great content from Retriebar. Everything you need to get you ready for the 2024 fantasy football season and just normal football season over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. We'll be back next week. I think we have 2 episodes. We're going to have a very interesting episode, a win totals draft episode that Pam and I will be on for that one, going through all the teams, drafting them, seeing who can win at the end for bragging rights. I unfortunately think Warren won last year, which I'm
Are
not
we
fond of
surprised?
that. I'm not fond of that. I'll lie to you. So we have to bond together and beat him this year. I'm really excited about that. But yeah,
Let's
that'll
do
be
that.
fun next week. So make sure you subscribe, stick around, and we'll talk to you then.